as we could see the reports of another revolution taking place on the African continent, and at least that's what it seems is that it's taking place. Another coup, if you want to call it that, took place in Gabon, as many of you have probably heard, and the leader, Ali Bongo, was ousted by the military. And leading up to this, there was a lot of turmoil in the country because many of the citizens felt that the riches of the country's oil production was not passed along to the people and the citizens of the country. They were not benefiting from the profits of the oil. Many of these profits being given to countries like France, who has been in control of that country since it was its colonizer. And these neo-colonial leaders like Ali Bongo and his father, who've been in power for so long, have continuously sold their people out. And this coup is another example of the youth in Africa saying enough is enough, even though we know that the military is being used as a vehicle to conduct these revolutions. When you look at the reactions from the people, when you look at the videos of the crowds of the people, the spirit of liberation is in them because they all are anti-France, anti the Western world, anti-neo-colonialism and corruption. So it's raised a different dynamic than what we've seen in history, where many of the coups that have taken place have been coups that have been sponsored by Western countries like the United States, like France, like the United Kingdom. Now these countries are reacting to these coups with anger and disagreement. And we see African leaders beginning to shake in their boots. As we saw reports today in countries like Cameroon and Rwanda, where there was some reshuffling done amongst the military positions. So we know that Paul Kagame in Rwanda, who has also been in power for a very long time, retired 12 generals and retired 83 leading officers in his military. And when we look at Cameroon, Paul Biya also did some reshuffling of his military. And they're afraid. They're afraid that this contagious revolution action can move into their country and oust them from power. And when we look across the board at these different coups that have been taking place, one of the things that we also have to be wary of is many of the leaders in various countries that have conducted these coups have a background in United States military training. And this is also something that the United States has reacted to in what they're calling a bad monster movie. I saw an article on Politico where a U.S. general was talking about how he trained, I think it was Moussa Barmou in Niger, and he talked about his relationship with Barmou, and he talked about how he felt that he was a leader that was going to uphold democracy, and he was shocked when he found out that he was also participating in this coup that had taken place. And it shows that the United States invested almost $500 million militarily in Niger, which is why they don't want to give up on the country just because this coup is taking place. But also, you know, other generals that they've trained in different areas in what they're calling training for the fight against terrorism or jihadists. It shows that African people who had their own individual mind and way of thinking are able to go in and possibly take training and then take that training and use it to their advantage to achieve this type of movement for their freedom. And that's if it's the case. Now, you know, we have to be wary and say we have to put it on the table and say, could this be, strategically orchestrated by the United States somehow to disempower France so that they can gain some type of resource control in these countries? We don't know. But if that is a move that the United States is making, it's a very risky one, given the fact that at any time, countries like Russia and China can step in and become a key player in taking away that option from the United States. So, in looking at this, I see this as a positive right now. I think that you're going to see more of this take place. I do believe that, Kagame, somebody like Kagame is strategically, he's strategically placed in a position where he is trying to smartly protect himself. And it may be a little bit easier for him to protect himself than, let's say, Cameroon. I believe Cameroon could easily be taken over by a coup, given the fact that the leader is 90 years old, and the country or the economy is not as stable as Rwanda. So the citizens in Rwanda may not be as thirsty for a revolution as the citizens in a Cameroon or Gabon. But I know, Baba Marco, I know you watched this take place. Tell us what you're thinking. Do you think that this is an organic movement, or do you think that this could somehow be a assisted movement or a strategic plan by the United States?
Well, I think we have to look at each situation and analyze the results that we have seen so far. The coups in so-called coups, we really need to start calling these rebellions or overthrows, depending on which direction they go in. But the events in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger were clearly driven or precipitated by the failure of the governments of those countries to protect their citizens from jihadist terrorism, and which was also having a damaging impact on the economy and the ability to employ the youth of these countries. All of these countries have well over 50% of the population of these countries, in some cases 60% or higher, are people who are under the age of 25, in many cases under the age of 21. And these people need jobs. And a lot of times the jihadists are attacking the very resources that the countries need in order to put people to work. I know this is particularly the case with gold in both Mali and in Burkina Faso. So those situations were driven by the failure of governments. The situation in Gabon and Guinea are somewhat similar. In Guinea, Conte wanted to change the constitution so that he could run for a third term, and the people in the military say, no, you're going to abide by you're going to step down. If you don't step down, then we'll have to move you out the way. And that's what they did. In the case in Gabon, Bongo, who was first elected after his father, this transpired back in 2009, was just reelected with 65% of the vote, which some observers, even from places like the EU, said the vote was suspect. After the results were announced, Bryce Nguma, if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, who actually is a cousin of Ali Bongo and who has benefited from the 56-year dynasty of corruption and self-enrichment that the Bongo family has been able to amass since 1967, they decided that it was time to move Bongo out. a man who has been virtually incapacitated in a lot of ways from a stroke that he had in 2018. So they decided to move him out. Now, there are a lot of questions. Is this a movement towards self-determination, a movement towards a more egalitarian society that appears to be taking shape, particularly in Burkina Faso? Is this a similar situation, or is it just a battle among people who are part of the kleptocracy? As I said, Bryson Goomer owns 3 homes in the suburbs of Washington, D.C., in Maryland, which he, according to an investigative report, he reportedly paid $1 million cash for these 3 homes in Maryland. So is it possible that he will continue the kleptocracy, or will he betray his class interests, say the way Dr. Fidel Castro and Dr. Che Guevara did in Cuba? Will he betray his class interests and do things that are beneficial to the masses of people? Gabon is, I think, the 4th largest oil producer on the African continent. It is minerally rich in items such as manganese, which is needed in these electronic batteries. So the riches are there. But what we have seen with this kleptocracy run by the Bongo family, these people own, I think, somewhere in the neighborhood of 39 real estate properties in France, numerous luxury vehicles, numerous bank accounts, I think 70 or some odd bank accounts in various European banks, in the United States and in Europe. So, I mean, these people are just straight up thieves. They are like a criminal enterprise that they have been running. And so we can understand why the masses of people are in the streets. They attempted, some of the junior officers attempted a coup. I believe it was in 2018. I think it was 2018. They attempted a coup against Bongo, and it was squashed. So now we have a different group of officers that have apparently seized control of the government. And I guess only time will tell in which direction they will go. 2 things that are very, very interesting to the rebellions and the overthrows in Niger and Gabon. The position of the United States has been markedly different compared to the way they have responded to what happened in Mali and Burkina Faso. The U.S. government, which is supposed to be this beacon of democracy, which Omar Wally Malcolm X called a disguised hypocrisy, has failed to label either of the takeovers or the overthrows in Niger or in Gabon as coups, because once they are labeled as coups, certain legal activities have to take place in terms of suspension of economic aid and different types of things have to take place. So the Biden administration has been walking on eggshells unless they know exactly what's going on. They've been walking on eggshells, and they have refused. They have refused to label either of those activities in those 2 countries as a coup d'etat. So that in and of itself is very interesting. And, there have been some analysts who have suggested that the United States has no confidence in the capability of France to continue to uphold its part of the neo-colonial project. When you look at the countries that quote unquote France has lost, beginning with the Central African Republic, which the Wagner organization has been involved in now for I think about 5 or 6 years. Mali, then Burkina Faso, then Niger. All of these are part and Gabon are part of what's known as Francophone Africa. And France has not been able to hold these countries, in line. So, is it beyond the realm of possibility that the United States has jumped in and tried to orchestrate these things? It's not beyond the realm of possibility, but at the same time, we have to give African people credit for taking matters into their own hands. It's just that at least with these two situations, we just don't know. We don't know. We know that the UN applied, sanctions to Mali. They tried. I think the sanctions came up today. They had to vote again to continue the sanctions, and Russia vetoed it in the Security Council. So the UN is no longer able to apply sanctions to Mali. So we have to look at each situation and analyze each situation, from afar, to the extent that we can talk to anybody, like the brother that you talked to the other day from Kenya, people who are actually on the ground in these countries. We just have to analyze it from our best ability, based on our study of history, Kwame Nkrumah, neocolonialism, the last stage of imperialism, introduction to neocolonialism by Jack Woodis, a number of things that we have read over the years to give us an understanding of, these geopolitics that affect us as global African citizens. So, that's the way I'm looking at it. I'm hopeful that what's going on will be something that is beneficial to African people. That's clearly the direction in Mali and Burkina Faso. It seems to be leaning in that direction in Niger. One other interesting thing almost is that unlike the situation with Bazoum in Niger, no one so far has called for the government to replace Bongo for the military to replace Bongo. So it appears that he has served his purpose, and now they're hanging him out to dry, putting him out to pasture, and they're trying to groom some other people. The AFRICOM did hold a major military exercise in Libreville, Gabon, back in April. And so, was Bryce Nguma, was he involved in this? See, these are all things we don't know, but we do know that AFRICOM was there. United States Marines, United States sailors, all part of the 6th Fleet, which is based in Rota, Spain. They were all in Gabon just as recently as April. So you have to throw that information into the mix. And, we can't react to these things emotionally as much as we want to see things moving towards Abiba Fahodie. We have to always think critically and analyze all of the information that comes to us from the perspective of a rational and emotional engagement of the issue rather than being unbalanced.
Yeah, and you mentioned hypocrisy. One of the things that strikes me about this Gabon situation is when you have a family that's been in power for 56 years, and when we look at Zimbabwe and how the United States and the UK have stated for years that these are unfair elections, and they wanted to have election observers in Zimbabwe, and they've clearly stated, as you stated just now, that they didn't feel that these Gabon elections were credible elections, but yet they still allowed the Bongo family to go untouched and unsanctioned for all of this time. And we're talking about a man who, if we look at this video, this guy had a stroke in 2018. He could hardly walk. This is him meeting Boris Johnson in the UK. How is he fit to be the president of the country when he can even barely operate health-wise? So we know that there's a string of corruption that's going on, that's taking place. And now we see, you know, the military stepping in, uh, and of course, you know, the African Union coming out saying that they're temporarily suspending Gabon because of this coup that's taking place. Like you said, I mean, I don't like to use the word coup. I use it because it's, you know, what people can recognize. But these are what we hope to be rebellions or revolutions.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you know, the one thing that gives me some pause about what's taking place is back in 2017, Senator Lindsey Graham in the United States made a comment where he said that the American people had to be prepared for the war to shift to Africa.
Yes. Yep.
And they've been, you know, inserting these jihadists and these terrorists that they've created in the Sahel region on the African continent. But that is not necessarily translated to a full-blown war as you would see in Afghanistan. But if you remember, what's happening right now on the continent of Africa is similar to what happened in Afghanistan back in the 1990s. So they were preparing and sort of seasoning the area for a later full-blown invasion or war.
Yeah.
So when I hear that plan by the United States to prepare for a war in Africa, you know, this could be the preparation of setting the table for them to say, okay, let's go in, fully invade so that we can restore what they will call democracy in all of these various countries, which would then give them the super foothold on the African continent, which would set them up for the next however so many years. I hope that that's not the case. I hope that this is just organically African people saying enough is enough. But that's the only thing that I would say gives me some pause on thinking that it's not impossible for the United States to be, if not directly behind it, influencing it for their future agenda.
Yeah, and I tell you, the horse manure could be getting ready to hit the fan in Niger because they have cut off electricity, water, and food to the French embassy in Niamey. So they requested that the French ambassador, the military leaders in Niger requested a meeting with the ambassador. Now, anywhere in the world, if the leader of a country, it doesn't matter. I mean, in reality, the leader of the country is the leader of a country. I mean, France didn't hesitate to recognize the rebels, the people who were engaged in a war of independence against King George in 1776. France was, I believe, the first country to recognize the independence of what became the United States about 6 or 7 years before the war ended with the Treaty of Paris in 1783. So that's not it's being very disrespectful. I mean, Biden sent Victoria Nuland over there, the Wicked Witch of Ukraine, to meet with the leaders, the revolutionary leaders, or the rebels, or whatever you may want to call them. She demanded to meet with the president who had been removed from power, and they said no. When they requested that the French ambassador meet with them, he refused because he said, "You're not the legitimate government." And so they said, "Well, you have to leave the country." Now, mind you, this is part of a pattern, beginning with Mali in January of 2022 and continuing with Burkina Faso in January of 2023. They kicked the French ambassadors out of those two countries. Now, it seems that President Macron wants to draw a line with Niger, but he knows that France alone can't do it. And he needs the cover of ECOWAS, which the masses, the people have rose up, in Nigeria, in Ghana, in different places, saying that the various legislative assemblies in those countries and saying, no, 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 no. We are not shedding African blood. We're not doing it. Francis said, if ECOWAS invades, we'll back you up. In other words, they're looking for some Africans to be their cannon fodder or be their Quimbos or Sambos and go in and kill other Africans so that they can regain control, because they're very concerned about being able to continue to produce electricity, because they need the uranium from Niger. So it really could become a situation that is very interesting. Will NATO, if France goes in, will NATO back them up? I mean, this is very complicated. 14 NATO countries invaded Libya. Okay, so this is a tricky situation. They'll never get a resolution or a UN resolution through the Security Council, to do something, because Russia has learned their lesson. Russia failed Africa in 2011, but they've learned their lesson now. They won't allow it. I don't think the Chinese will allow it either. But, the Russians definitely will not allow it. You're not getting anything through the UN. So if you're going to do it, it'll have to be another NATO operation, such as, that you are carrying out in Ukraine, which is very interesting. It appears that the latest bombing on Russian soil possibly came from a NATO country, Estonia. So, they're just playing with fire in that part of the world. But, we're primarily concerned with what's happening with our people. And how long can they hold out? They can hold out without electricity for just a period of time. Sooner or later, the food is going to spoil. Without water, something's got to give. Something has got to give. So rather than just saying, okay, it's your country, you want us out, we'll leave. No, this is not the mentality of white supremacy. They say, you Africans have no right to tell us to get out of your country. So I'm more concerned about what's happening in Niamey right now than I am about the other locales, of course. And we know Burkina Faso and Mali who said they would send troops. Mali's they're in a desperate struggle themselves right now against the jihadists. So we just have to see. But that's what we're here for, to try to bring this information to the African world, from our perspective.
Well, if you haven't seen the clip of Ali Bongo begging for international help under house arrest, here's a clip of him pleading to the international community to come save him and his family.
Ondimba, president of Gabon, and I'm to send a message to all the friends that we have all over the world, to tell them to make noise, for the people here have arrested me and my family. My son is somewhere, my wife is another place, and I'm at the residence. Right now, I'm in the residence and nothing happening. Nothing is happening. I don't know what's going on. So I'm calling you to make noise,
Military officers announced Wednesday morning that they were overturning.
Now, when you look at, the two situations, when you look at Gabon and you look at Niger, you look at the two presidents that are being held under house arrest. They're lucky that these military officers haven't just decided to execute them. When the UK or the United States, the CIA, Mossad, whoever, when they orchestrate a coup, they normally have the current leader killed, executed, body burned in acid, buried in unmarked grave or what have you. They don't leave any remains for the people to try to resurrect that person from the ancestral realm. They want that person totally removed. And here you have these brothers who at least have enough dignity to say, you know, we will detain you and possibly maybe even exile you versus just go ahead and executing you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, he was wondering where his son was. His son had apparently withdrew a lot of money or taken a lot of millions of dollars. I mean, this it looked like that scene in the Equalizer, you know, when they raided that drug warehouse. I mean, it's untold amounts of money that apparently he was trying to use to get out of the country. And they have arrested several members of the Bongo clique, or the Bongo cartel, or whatever you want to call them. But yeah, they have not done to these leaders what the United States did to Patrice Lumumba, which the race traders, most likely under the orders from France, did to Thomas Sankara. And of course, we know what happened to Muammar Gaddafi in 2011. So you're right on, Brother Amos, in terms of the humanitarian way that the rebels have dealt with you know, those corrupt leaders in Niger and Gabon.